When Eilat Mazar realized she discovered an ancient structure near Jerusalem, she turned to the Bible to help explain what she found.
And she learned that this new discovery supports the biblical accounts of King David and his son Solomon.
King Solomon's DNA discovery was disturbing enough to be hidden, and now in 2026, the truth is moving back toward the light. It began inside a damaged burial cave near Jerusalem, where looters had already broken the silence before archaeologists could fully understand what they had exposed. That is what makes this so unsettling. The cave stood near Tel Kiriath-jearim, a place tied to ancient memory, sacred authority, and the world that later pointed towards Solomon's kingdom. Inside were bones, broken vessels, and traces of people buried across generations. At first, it looked like another ruined tomb from the First Temple world. But the deeper record was not written on pottery. It was hidden inside the bones. So what did the DNA reveal near Solomon's world? And why did someone want the truth buried until 2026? The cave appeared inside the modern village of Abu Ghosh, approximately 15 kilometers west of Jerusalem. It had been cut directly into the rock on the slope of Tel Kiriath-jearim, a place carrying both archaeological importance and powerful biblical memory. Looting exposed the chamber before archaeologists could record its original arrangement. The Israel Antiquities Authority's Antiquities Theft Prevention Unit and Jerusalem Regional Office responded to rescue what remained. Inside, they found broken vessels, displaced bones, and a burial space used by more people than the disturbed floor first suggested. Human remains had been pushed together, making it difficult to reconnect skulls, limbs, and personal burial objects. Physical examination identified at least 10 individuals, including adults and children. The cave had probably held more people during its long use, but disturbance had erased parts of the count. Archaeologists recovered fragments from approximately 150 pottery vessels. Their shapes, materials, and manufacturing styles placed the main burial activity in the Iron II period. This date carried the Iron II rock-cut burial cave into the wider First Temple world. Jerusalem stood at the center of the Kingdom of Judah, while the remembered beginnings of its royal and religious order remained inseparable from David, Solomon, and the Temple. Kiriath-jearim deepened that connection. Biblical tradition placed the Ark on this hill before its journey toward Jerusalem. The cave did not contain a royal name, but it held people buried in the landscape where sacred authority was remembered as passing towards Solomon's capital. Looters had taken objects and destroyed context. What they left seemed like fragments of an ordinary community tomb. Yet archaeologists understood that some parts of the skull can preserve genetic material long after heat and moisture destroy DNA elsewhere. The cave had served a community rather than one isolated burial. Each new death could bring relatives back into the chamber, where older remains were moved to create space. Pottery vessels accompanied the dead, carrying food, drink, or objects connected with mourning and remembrance. Over time, one chamber became a layered record of generations. Looting destroyed the order of those layers, but the number of adults and children showed that the tomb had belonged to a continuing social group. Its occupants had lived, formed families, and buried one another within sight of the hill associated with the Ark. Among the mixed bones, two dense pieces offered a path into the biological population living inside Solomon's inherited world. The next stage moved from the ruined cave into an ancient DNA laboratory. The skeletal remains had been mixed so thoroughly that researchers could not rebuild two complete bodies. Instead, they selected two right petrous bones from the damaged deposit. The petrous portion sits deep inside the human skull. It is among the hardest and densest bones in the body. That density can protect ancient genetic fragments from moisture, heat, microbes, and handling better than ordinary skeletal material. The samples received laboratory codes rather than historical identities. One became I14918. The other became I14919. The numbers prevented assumptions about names, social status, ancestry, or family position from entering the scientific work. Genetic analysis identified I14918 as biologically male and I14919 as biologically female. Both came from the same burial environment, although the mixed chamber could not establish whether they were husband and wife, siblings, distant relatives, or people separated by generations. The pottery sequence placed the cave's main use around 750 to 650 BCE. This fell within the later Kingdom of Judah and the centuries-long First Temple period. The dead therefore lived after the time traditionally assigned to Solomon, but inside a kingdom that remembered him as its founding temple builder and ruler. Their DNA carried the biological world formed beneath that royal and religious legacy. The burial method and pottery tied them to the Jerusalem region. The hill connected them with Kiriath-jearim. The genetic samples now offered information unavailable from architecture, vessels, or bones alone. Only 2 petrous bones preserved enough material to create the reported profiles. That scarcity made every sequence important. Ancient DNA from the southern Levant rarely survives, and usable material from First Temple burials had remained especially difficult to recover. The looted cave had lost its arrangement, but it had not lost everything. Inside 2 coded fragments remained maternal and paternal lines capable of reaching beyond the tomb, beyond Jerusalem, and across Western Asia. Recovering ancient DNA in Israel is extraordinarily difficult. Heat accelerates molecular decay. Moisture and microbes break genetic strands into pieces too small to identify. Thousands of years of burial can leave a bone outwardly intact while its biological record disappears. Earlier, First Temple tombs had produced pottery, architecture, seals, inscriptions, and human remains. Yet usable DNA from the people behind those objects remained extremely rare. The Kiriath-jearim bones changed that. Their dense internal structure protected enough material for researchers to examine mitochondrial DNA in both individuals and a Y chromosome marker in the male. Mitochondrial DNA follows the maternal line. It can reveal whether 2 people share the same broad maternal ancestry. The Y chromosome passes through the paternal line, allowing the male sample to be placed within a wider father-to-son genetic branch. Preliminary results appeared during 2023 inside Specialist Archaeological Material. The samples were scientific codes surrounded by technical discussion, not famous names presented to a mass audience. A fuller study by Aryeh Schaus and David Reich appeared inside the excavation volume published in July 2025. Their chapter placed the genetic findings beside the cave, pottery, skeletal analysis, and settlement history. Wider attention followed during 2026. For the first time, the 2 small samples reached beyond specialist readers and became part of a public question about Solomon, Judah, ancestry, and the First Temple population. The laboratory had recovered something once thought almost impossible: biological lines from people buried in the kingdom associated with Jerusalem's First Temple age. But the profiles did not combine into one clean ancestral signature. The male carried a paternal branch extending across a large region. The 2 people belonged to separate maternal lines. The population beneath Solomon's legacy was beginning to look far more connected than isolated. The male sample carried Y chromosome haplogroup J2. This paternal lineage occurs across the Near East and extends into Anatolia, the Caucasus, the Mediterranean, and surrounding parts of Western Asia. J2 did not point toward one palace or one king. It placed the man inside an ancient paternal branch shared across communities connected by migration, trade, farming, marriage, warfare, and settlement. The 2 individuals carried different maternal lines. One was identified as T1A9. The other belonged to H87. The separate markers showed that the people buried in one chamber did not descend from a single maternal founder. T1A-related ancestry appears across parts of Western Eurasia. H87 has a much smaller and widely scattered recorded distribution. Each line carried its own route into the Judahite landscape. These were separate maternal lineages inside one burial setting. Mitochondrial markers follow only one narrow branch of ancestry: mother, maternal grandmother, and the women before them. The Y chromosome follows another narrow branch through the father's line. Together, they do not describe every ancestor carried by either person, but they expose 2 long genetic threads that reach the cave from different directions. The result disturbed the idea that Solomon's kingdom could be reduced to one isolated biological signature. People sharing a burial cave could belong to different maternal histories while still becoming members of one local community. Kiriath-jearim stood between the coastal plain and Jerusalem's highland world. Movement through the region was normal. Families formed across routes carrying goods, workers, soldiers, worshippers, and political influence. The DNA preserved that movement in human bodies. The male's Western Asian paternal connection joined a broad population, while the maternal differences showed more than one family line entering the same burial group. These were limited uniparental markers rather than complete life histories. Yet the pattern already carried a powerful meaning. The first temple population was biologically connected to the wider region around it. The disturbing discovery was therefore not a strange mutation hidden within Solomon's blood. It was the collapse of a much simpler idea, the belief that the kingdom beneath his name belonged to one sealed and exclusive line. The hill above the cave gave the DNA its deepest biblical importance. Kiriath-jearim appears in the account of the Ark's movement after its return from Philistine territory. According to 1 Samuel 6-7, the Ark was taken to the house of Abinadab. His son Eleazar was appointed to guard it, and the sacred object remained connected with the hill before Jerusalem became its destination. David later attempted to move the Ark toward his capital. The journey described in 2 Samuel 6 and 1 Chronicles tied Kiriath-jearim to the creation of Jerusalem's central religious authority. Biblical tradition completed that transformation through Solomon's temple. The Ark entered the sacred world of the new sanctuary, while Solomon's rule became associated with wisdom, wealth, international trade, construction, and a united royal center. Modern excavation on the mound began in 2017 under Israel Finkelstein, Thomas Romer, and Christoph Nicole. Archaeologists returned to a location known for centuries, mainly through scripture and religious memory. The burial cave stood on the slope rather than inside a palace or temple. Its occupants were not identified as kings, priests, or guardians of the Ark. Their importance came from belonging to the human community surrounding the sacred route. The bones tied ordinary people to a place where political and religious power was remembered as moving toward Jerusalem. Their DNA added a biological layer to a landscape already filled with scripture, pottery, architecture, and contested memory. That connection turned two damaged skull fragments into far more than isolated laboratory samples. They represented lives formed beneath the legacy of the Ark, Judah, the Jerusalem Temple, and Solomon's remembered kingdom. The next question was who could recover reliable information from bones buried for almost 3,000 years, and how scientists could separate genuine ancient material from everything added after death. Physical anthropologist Vered Eshed examined the mixed human bones and established the minimum number of individuals represented inside the cave. Her work showed that adults and children had shared the burial chamber across its period of use. Leora Freud studied the pottery. Vessel shapes linked the cave with the Iron 2B and early Iron 2C periods, building the chronological frame needed to understand the genetic samples. The burial chamber itself was documented by Gideon Goldenberg. Each surviving wall, opening, pottery group, and disturbed skeletal deposit became part of the final archaeological record. Aria Schaus worked with Harvard geneticist David Reich to analyze the two ancient individuals. Their study reported the maternal markers preserved in both samples and the paternal marker recovered from the male. The petrous bones were chosen because their density limited exposure. Researchers extracted highly degraded molecules under conditions designed to control contamination from modern handlers and the surrounding environment. Fresh human DNA could overwhelm the small amount remaining from antiquity. Ancient DNA contamination controls were therefore essential. Every sequence had to be examined before it could be assigned to the ancient individuals. Sex identification, mitochondrial sequencing, and Y chromosome analysis produced the surviving biological profile. The laboratory could identify broad lines of ancestry, but the archaeological setting remained necessary to explain who these people were culturally. Pottery and burial practice placed them inside the Judahite world. Geography connected them to Kiriath-jearim and Jerusalem. Genetics connected them to lineages spread across the wider Near East. The scientists had read the bones, but the meaning required every field to work together. DNA alone could not name a Judahite. Archaeology alone could not show the ancestral lines carried inside the skull. Joined together, they produced the first rare genetic view of Solomon's first temple legacy. The cave's burial customs and Jerusalem region pottery placed its occupants within the cultural world of the Kingdom of Judah. Their community used objects and practices familiar across the highlands surrounding the capital. Kiriath-jearim occupied a strategic route between the coastal plain and Jerusalem. Merchants, travelers, laborers, pilgrims, officials, and families moved through a settlement positioned between different landscapes. The DNA showed the biological effect of that movement. The male carried the widespread J2 paternal line. The separate maternal markers demonstrated that one burial community could contain people whose maternal histories followed different paths. Marriage and family alliances could bring individuals from separate backgrounds into one local group. After death, those people shared the same cave because cultural identity, household belonging, and community could unite lives that did not begin with one maternal ancestor. Even the biblical portrait of Solomon's international court described wide connections. Phoenician builders, diplomatic marriages, foreign trade, imported materials, and long routes tied Jerusalem to neighboring regions. The genetic result placed that regional connection inside human ancestry. The kingdom was not connected only through cedar, metal, tribute, and commerce. Its people carried lines formed across the wider Near East. This changed the biblical picture in a direct way. Solomon's world was not a sealed mountain society separated from surrounding populations. It stood inside a network where people, goods, skills, languages, and family lines moved together. The samples did not produce one royal gene. They exposed a diverse First Temple population hidden beneath later arguments about blood, ancestry, and exclusive ownership of the past. That was the truth capable of disturbing modern expectations. The people of ancient Judah belonged to their kingdom and religious culture, yet their biology preserved connections reaching far beyond its borders. Kiriath-jearim's position also meant that genetic movement did not require one dramatic migration. A woman could enter a local family through marriage. A craftsman might settle after traveling from another region. Traders and officials could form households along the road between the coast and the highlands. Across generations, these ordinary movements changed the biological population without erasing its Judahite language, burial customs, worship, or political identity. The DNA captured the quiet human roots that royal chronicles rarely record. The result carried enormous historical weight, but it remained largely outside public discussion for years. The reason began with the destruction inside the cave and continued through the slow world of specialist archaeological publication. The first concealment occurred when looters entered in December 2018. They disturbed the chamber before archaeologists could photograph every body, vessel, and burial object in its original position. Bones from different people were piled together. That movement broke the physical relationships needed to rebuild family groups. A skull fragment could no longer be matched confidently with every other bone from the same person. The cave contained no surviving personal inscriptions naming the dead. Nothing identified a royal household, priestly family, military office, or direct connection to Solomon's dynasty. Only 2 individuals produced the reported genetic profiles. 2 samples cannot represent all Judah, but they could open the first narrow window into a population that had remained biologically silent. The DNA itself was partial. Researchers recovered maternal markers from both individuals and a paternal marker from the male. Complete genomes and full family relationships remained beyond the surviving material. The scientific work moved slowly because every part required separate expertise. Pottery had to be sorted and dated. Bones had to be counted and assessed. The cave needed documentation. Genetic material required contamination-controlled extraction and analysis through a multi-year specialist study. Early results appeared in specialist archaeological material during 2023. The information was accessible to experts who knew where to look, but it remained buried behind sample codes, technical language, and a fragmented publication history. The complete excavation volume arrived in July 2025. By then, years had passed since the cave was exposed. The genetic result was finally placed beside the archaeology that gave it meaning. This was how the discovery remained hidden in plain sight. No palace vault was required. Looting destroyed context, technical limits reduced the samples, and specialist publication kept the result beyond ordinary public attention. The damage also controlled what could be said in public. Without original body positions, researchers could not present a complete family tree. Without names, they could not attach either code to a household known from scripture. Without more genomes, they could not turn two people into a biological portrait of the entire kingdom. The result therefore remained divided across technical categories: pottery chronology in one chapter, skeletal assessment in another, genetics in another. Only when the chapters were read together did the hidden picture emerge. Wider reporting in 2026 pulled the two profiles out of that narrow record. The moment the DNA was connected publicly with Kiriath-jearim, the Ark, Judah, and Solomon's First Temple world, the significance changed completely. The excavation volume Kiriath-jearim, the Shmuni's family excavations, brought the separate parts together in 2025. The cave no longer appeared as an isolated report, and the DNA no longer floated without context. Chapter 25 documented the burial chamber. Chapter 26 established the pottery sequence. Chapter 27 examined the human remains. Chapter 28 presented the ancient DNA findings for I-14918 and I-14919. Gideon Goldenberg recorded the cave. Leora Freud built its pottery chronology. Vered Eshed assessed the commingled bones. Schaus and Reich presented the surviving uniparental markers. The final settlement analysis placed the tomb inside the changing political landscape around Kiriath-jearim and Jerusalem. The people in the cave became part of a regional history rather than anonymous bones without time or place. The volume's publication through Pennsylvania State University Press and its specialist record placed the research into the formal archaeological literature. Wider coverage during July 2026 transformed the technical result into a public question. Headlines connected the bones with King Solomon, while the excavation record revealed something more historically powerful than one isolated royal profile. The DNA belonged to people living around 750 to 650 BCE, inside the First Temple Kingdom that remembered Solomon as its founding builder. Their lines showed a population connected biologically with the larger Western Asian world. The publication explained why the samples mattered. One cave combined Judahite pottery, First Temple burial practice, Kiriath-jearim's sacred geography, and the first rare genetic signals from people living inside that world. No single chapter carried the whole discovery. Its force appeared only when the damaged tomb, dated vessels, human remains, and genetic markers were placed beside one another. Together, they restored the setting that looting had nearly erased from the chamber forever. By 2026, the pieces could finally be read together. Looted chamber, two petrous bones, one male, one female, separate maternal histories, a broad paternal branch, and a landscape tied to the Ark's journey toward Jerusalem. The question was no longer whether science had found one magical Solomon gene. It was what the people beneath his legacy revealed about the kingdom modern audiences thought they already understood. The truth behind King Solomon's DNA discovery began with two people, not one king. They were buried beside Kiriath-jearim around 750 to 650 BCE within the later Kingdom of Judah and the First Temple Age. The male carried J2 paternal ancestry, a lineage extending across the Near East, Anatolia, the Caucasus, and neighboring regions. The male and female carried different maternal markers, T109 and H87. Those lines revealed a biologically connected population. People buried inside one Judahite cave did not need to descend from one exclusive maternal founder. Their community could unite families whose ancestors arrived through different regional paths. The cave's location tied their lives to Kiriath-jearim's Ark tradition. This was the landscape where sacred authority was remembered as resting before David moved it toward Jerusalem, and Solomon's temple became its final center. The discovery therefore reached Solomon through the kingdom and temple tradition, and through the human population shaped beneath his legacy. It recovered DNA from the world that remembered him, built around his royal image, and carried his religious inheritance forward. The truth emerging in 2026 was larger than one royal profile. Science had begun reading the biological record of the first temple population, and that population did not fit inside one isolated bloodline. The result had remained buried beneath a looted context, technical sample codes, specialist chapters, and years of archaeological study. Once assembled, it changed how the kingdom could be understood. Solomon's Judah was culturally distinct yet regionally connected. Its people shared burial practices, pottery, political authority, and sacred memory while carrying genetic lines spread across Western Asia. This was the disturbing discovery hidden inside the cave. Ancestry and cultural identity were not the same thing. A kingdom could possess a powerful shared identity without every family descending from one biological source. Two skull bones broke the genetic silence surrounding biblical Judah. They did not narrow Solomon's world into one family. They expanded it into a population shaped by movement, marriage, trade, worship, and generations of contact. That distinction changes the historical question. Royal history usually follows rulers, wars, temples, and monumental construction. DNA follows the people whose names never entered those records. It can show how communities formed beneath royal power and how ancestry crossed borders that later generations imagined as fixed. The cave made ordinary Judahites part of the record. Their genetic lines revealed the population supporting the towns, roads, farms, and religious institutions that gave Solomon's legacy its lasting power. Future First Temple samples may reveal complete family networks and move the genetic record closer to the 10th century BCE. For now, I-14918 and I-14919 remain the first narrow opening. The truth that came out in 2026 was not simply who carried Solomon's blood. It was what kind of human world existed beneath his name. A connected First Temple kingdom whose people carried many ancestral roads into one sacred history.